Hey guys, it's your mom. I wanted to talk today. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do for this video. It's the 5th of August, so it's supposed to be my fifth video, but I missed the third one because I was sick. I'm still a little sick, but I'm past the worst of it, and so I don't really have a valid excuse not to create something. Since the premise of this is to vlog every day in August, I thought it would be okay if I just kind of talked for a bit. And this is kind of a hard one because I legitimately have been racking my brain trying to think of something interesting to share with you all, but I don't really have a lot of stuff that's easily accessible at the moment. I was going to share some of my art, and I just didn't have anything on hand that I could do, and it's late in the day now, but I have about an hour while my kids and husband are at the gym, and so I'm just going to talk from the heart. And what I want to talk about is mental health. Because right now there's been a lot of talk in the news about mass shootings, and not to beat around the bush, but I'm tired of it. And one of the things that I've seen thrown around a lot is that these murderers are mentally ill. And it reminded me of this conversation that I had with my older brother a couple years ago about mass murders and mass shootings, because obviously we live in America and it's always in the news because someone is always shooting people up. And I can't remember what we were talking about, but he said something and I said something, and he said, oh, it's all about mental illness. They're all mentally ill. And I was saying, we don't know they're mentally ill. You know what I mean? They're murderers. They went out and killed somebody. There's no diagnosis there. And he said, well, would you argue that someone who could go out and shoot people is not mentally ill? And it kind of stopped me in my tracks because I was thinking, well, I mean, how do you come back from that? Because if you say they're not mentally ill, then surely a sane person wouldn't go and shoot people up. And that has been bothering me for the last couple of years, is that conversation. And now whenever anyone brings up the mental illness in these killers, I literally kind of shrink into myself and I don't join in any conversations because I think, well, I'm mentally ill myself. For those who don't know, I have borderline personality disorder, which is not like you see in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. While I love the show and it does have some really good points, it's not entirely accurate to my own experience, but it is very triggering. But I also have depression and generalized anxiety disorder, a little bit of OCD, and so I know mental illness. I am mentally ill. I know people who are mentally ill. I know people who are amazing people who are mentally ill. None of us is going and shooting people or killing people or writing a vendetta, a statement of intent about what we want to do to people who don't agree with us or who are different from us. But the problem is that because of that conversation, I felt like I could not join the conversation, because how do you justify someone killing people without saying they must be mentally ill? And this week has been a hard week. It's August 5th. There's been mass shootings in the news multiple times a day for the past couple days. And that terrifies me. I feel like I have to make decisions for my family about what we can do as a family based on my level of comfort with not getting shot. My kids all summer have been begging to go to an amusement park or, to a festival or to a concert. And so many times we've been ready to go and I just couldn't bring myself to do it, because people out enjoying their lives at festivals and concerts and amusement parks or going shopping for back to school are being murdered in cold blood by what amounts to domestic terrorists. These are white men. They are not foreign. They are not mentally ill. They are full of hate, and hate is not a mental illness. It is just not. These people have been indoctrinated, whether from birth or online later in life. They have been taught to hate by someone who they respect. And there are so many people like this. And this is so hard. This is such a hard thing for me to touch on, because there are people that I love in my own life who hate, who hate people for being different, whether it's their skin color or their religion or their ethnicity or their sexuality. They hate them because they are different. And having myself grown up in a small town with a very specific kind of mentality, I got very mixed signals, because I was taught to be good and to love people and to love the world and to respect everyone. And the people that I love and respected the most used terms or words that I didn't know were wrong. And so I grew up using words that I didn't know were wrong. And it wasn't until much later in life, when I left the country and moved overseas for a good, 10 or 12 years, that I realized just how backwards my thinking was, and how I had been indoctrinated into this American culture where we are the best and we are the greatest and everybody else is a loser and we win all the wars and we have the greatest military and we are amazing and whatever. I suddenly was exposed to people from all over the world and all different religions and ethnicities and sexualities. And I learned to love them and embrace them. And I learned that some of the words and the phrases that I had been using for so many years were just wrong. And I don't blame the people. And I'm sure there's going to be people in my family who watch this video and they may be offended. And I don't mean to offend. I love my family dearly. And I love all of the people in it. And I won't specifically name anyone because they get very upset when I do that. But I grew up with such mixed signals about who was right and who was wrong and what is right and what is wrong. And it took me a really long time to sort out my own feelings on it. I grew up thinking feminism was a bad word, and that any woman who could take power for herself, who had ambition, was a bitch, was a traitor to women. I remember, one thing that I do remember is my parents being completely anti-Bill Clinton. And my father worked far away, and he couldn't come and see us as often as we want. And it was always said, oh, it's Bill Clinton's fault. It's Bill Clinton's fault. And so I grew up hating Bill Clinton. And then when I got into high school, I remember my social studies teacher and history teacher were kind of like teaching us, obviously, history. And we talked about Bill Clinton. And he was still president at the time. And I don't know, like, I learned things that I didn't know before, and I learned some of the good things that he had done. Now, I'm not saying I'm like a huge Bill Clinton fan, but like, he wasn't as bad as I thought. And I remember that was the first time in my life where I was like, maybe my parents are wrong. And obviously with Bush, like, I didn't care about politics. I went to college in the year 2000, and after my first year there, I went back in the fall for fall semester in 2001, and we all know what happened then. I remember exactly where I was on 9/11. I remember everything that happened that day and that night and the next days and weeks. And it's like, I still get PTSD when people mention it, or if it's on a TV show, or if there's footage randomly shown of the towers. Like, that still like makes my heart beat faster. I remember so clearly what happened and how it felt. And I remember that on our campus, there were quite a few Indian kids who went to school with us and in my dorm, and people beat the shit out of them. They literally went up because they thought brown skin from the East, they're Muslim and they're terrorists. And they were like terrified. These kids couldn't walk down the streets. They were absolutely terrified. A lot of them dropped out. A lot of them just went home for, a few weeks. And I just remember thinking, but they're not the bad guys. These are the same kids we've seen day in and day out. But the anger that people felt, they had to direct somewhere, and they directed it at the first brown-skinned person who talked funny. And I remember watching President Bush give his address to the nation on the night, and sitting in a dorm room, in my friend Rob's dorm room, and there was like 20 of us in there holding each other, just holding hands and crowded together under blankets, just watching the TV with tears pouring down our faces. And all of our fear was directed to the outside. America was united. It was the biggest united the States have ever been as in my whole life. And it was amazing. It was amazing to see. There were flags everywhere. Every radio station was playing God Bless the USA. And it felt like we were as one voice, and it was united against an outside threat. And we went to war, and so many things happened, and I won't debate the logistics of that or the morality of that, because better people than I understand it. But that was the first time I was invested in politics, and I actually moved to the UK not too long after that all happened, about a year later. And in fact, my first husband, I met him, and he was supposed to fly out to see me in September. He was flying in from England. We hadn't met in person. We were pen pals online, and he was coming out to see a show with me. He was supposed to bring a friend, and then 9/11 happened. And I thought I'd never see him, because no way was I going to let him get on an airplane. And his friend ended up backing out, but he came. He came a week later on September 17th, so not even a week later. And I remember him telling me like how freaked out he was on the flight, and how like prepared he was to tackle anybody who he saw like looking funny. And he was just, everybody was vigilant. And he also mentioned that the plane was almost empty, so he had, rows to himself, because like no one wanted to fly. And it was literally like the airports had just reopened when he came. And so it was just like this whole big thing. And it took a long time for people to be comfortable flying again. And I actually, in that year, between when I ended up dropping out of school because I just, PTSD and all that, I ended up in that year between leaving school and moving to the UK, I became a flight attendant. And the reason for that was because I heard these stories of the flight attendants on board the flights on 9/11, and how they were keeping people calm and helping them to call their families. And there were all these stories coming out about the hero flight attendants. And I just thought, I'm terrified of flying. I always have been my whole life, absolutely terrified, just because of plane crashes, not because of terrorism. And I just decided then and there I wanted to be a flight attendant. And I spent a good few months like researching how to do it, applied, was hired, went to basic training in Phoenix, moved to Charlotte to live there at the hub. And I didn't last that long. It was a summer that I lasted. I ended up leaving and flying to the UK and just staying there, basically. And this is all besides the point. But the biggest thing is that now our country, people have tried to keep that united front against these foreign terrorists. And there's this image in everybody's mind that the brown people are out to get us and we're all going to die at their hands. And it's all bullshit. It's bullshit. And I am so tired of it. I am tired of the fact that we are being murdered in the streets. We are being murdered at the supermarket. We are being murdered in church. And it's white men who are angry at women for taking power. They are angry at brown people for being brown. They are angry at life. And I don't know how to rectify that. I don't know how to make people see that it's not a mental illness that they're feeling. It is this culture where we are telling people that women should be subservient. Women should not be feminists because feminism is a bad word. And us women are rising up and we're all about killing babies in the womb. We're all murderers and we're all trying to get all the money and we're trying to steal jobs. And the men are getting angry because we should be there for sex and for having their babies and for cooking their meals. That's what women are good for. And any woman who dares to defy any of that is a feminist, and that's a bad thing. Any foreign person who comes here, legally or illegally, is bad. Any person who is born here, who is brown-skinned or black-skinned or has an accent because they're second or third generation, or who speaks Spanish fluently because they learned it, they're bad. And we have the people who are highest in our nation who are using their dog whistle. But it's not even a dog whistle anymore. Everybody can hear it. We all hear what's happening. We all see what's happening. We know what's happening. And we are powerless to do anything because the people who have the power refuse to give it up, and they refuse to do what the people want. And they blame it on mental illness. Now let's talk about that, because this is a big issue too. There are many, many of us who suffer from mental illness. And the biggest problem with America right now is that none of us can get any help. Because one, the help isn't there. You need to have tons of money, be willing to wait a really long time, have the ability to go see your doctor, get referred to a specialist, get to the specialist, go through therapy, go through medication, get all this done, and you still have no guarantee that that's going to work. Meanwhile, anybody who does anything bad, oh, they must be mentally ill. Why would I, who might be afraid to get help in the first place, all of a sudden we're being told that the mentally ill are the ones that are killing people? How is that meant to make me feel like I can go get help now? All it does is make me think, oh God, they're going to think I'm going to kill somebody. People think I'm ready to snap. They think I'm going to go on a shootout. It's ridiculous to think that mental illness is the problem here. Mental illness is a problem, and it is a symptom of what's going on in this world, because how many of us have PTSD? How many of us are suffering depression because of what's actually happening around us? It's getting ridiculous, and it has to stop. And I don't know what to do. I am one person. I have a family to think about. I have a husband who supports me and kids who look up to me. And I try very hard every day to do my best to go out in the world and be a good person and make it a better place than I found it. And I'm terrified every day. I'm terrified of anybody I don't know. I'm terrified. I'm raising 4 boys, and I think about all of these domestic terrorist murderers who are going out and killing people because they are so entitled. And I'm raising 4 white men. And how am I supposed to make sure that they do not become these sorts of men when everyone around them is telling them that this is how a man should behave? They should be strong and not cry. They should be looking for women and expecting women to take care of them. I'm trying to teach my boys differently. I'm trying to teach them differently than I was taught, and I'm trying to teach them to be good. And meanwhile, I've got people in their lives who are giving them the exact opposite message that their dad and I are trying to teach them, which is, when are you going to get a girlfriend? When are you going to join the football team? Not every boy wants to do that. I am so afraid of what our country is becoming, and I am so afraid, being an outspoken advocate for those with mental illness, those who suffer in silence because they are too afraid of the stigma attached to mental illness, which is getting worse now with no help in sight. And I am mostly terrified that I'm going to go out and be shot dead in the street for looking at someone the wrong way, because that is the world we live in. I am terrified of sending my children to school, because what if someone shoots it up? I actually have talked to my kids. My oldest son is 8. And I've talked to all of them about what to do if they hear gunshots, what to do if they see someone with a gun. I shouldn't have to have these talks with my kids. I shouldn't have to consider where the exit is wherever I go. I shouldn't be afraid to sit with my back to a door or to a window in case I don't see what's coming at us. This is a hard topic, and I don't know if anybody will watch this. And if they do, I don't know how they will respond. I'm sure that there are going to be people who vehemently disagree with me. And I know that, like I said, there are people in my life that I love who might watch this and get angry, but I can't do anything about that. All I can do is speak out against things I know are wrong and speak up for what I know is right. And I know that hate is not a mental illness. People being indoctrinated to hate those who are other, who are different from them, they are a problem. And if you have hate in your heart, you need to open it a little bit wider and let in the light and understand that everyone is different. I am sick with what's going on. I am sick at what's happening at the border. I am sick with what's happening with the lack of common sense gun laws. And I am terrified that one day it's going to get too much for me. And I've been scared every single day since Columbine. And I remember it so well. I remember understanding for the first time that bad things can happen to innocent people. Before that, murder was just this idea in my mind of something that happened in California, something that happened in New York or Chicago or a big city where there were serial killers. That was my idea of murder. And it wasn't until Columbine that I realized just how insane it can really get and how normal, ordinary people can be affected. I don't know what to say. I don't know even what the point of this video is, except that I had to say something. I had to get it off my chest. I had to be a voice, and I might be a small voice, and that's okay. But I have to be firm and stand strong for what I believe in, and I believe that what's happening is wrong. I believe that the people in power, for the most part, are terrible. And I wish people would stop trying to change the subject, because anytime you bring up something bad that's happening or something that the president is doing or Congress is doing, immediately the people who want to defend them are up in arms and saying, what about Obama? What about Bill Clinton? Oh, Hillary was a crook. What about her emails? What does that have to do with anything? If Obama had done anything that I disagreed with, and he did, I would say so. If I find out something now about something that he did, I would be just as vocal. But he's not in charge. Hillary is not in charge. Donald Trump is in charge. And that is the saddest thing I've ever uttered out loud in my life. I'll never understand what happened. I grew up thinking this was the best country in the world, and that anyone who said differently was a traitor. And now all I can think is how sad I am at what our country has become. We are not making America great again or otherwise. We are the laughingstock of the world. We have a crosshair fixed on us from everywhere, and we are murdering each other in the streets and being applauded for it. I don't know what else to say. But that's my video. I won't say I hope you enjoyed it, but I hope it made you think. I hope it gave you an insight into who I am and what I stand for. And if you are someone who is suffering from mental illness in any way, I hope you will reach out and get help. There are free resources available. I'll try and put some in the description. There are people you can talk to. Hurting yourself or hurting someone else is never the answer. And I hope that all of us can get through however long it's going to take to get things back on track. All right, I'm done. And I don't really want to sign off, so thank you for watching.